I want to make this a brief comparison of the Triumvirate of Kaspar Mouthpieces: Chicago, Cicero, and an Arbor. Now, there are a million different blank combinations for these two separate makers in three different eras. But I want to play them all with a very short commentary. I'll start with the mouthpiece I've been playing a lot for the last couple of years. This is an Henri Chedeville, so very different from a Kaspar mouthpiece. So, I would say that that sound soars above an ensemble. Let me compare with a Frank Kaspar. Now, this is a Chicago, but it's Frank L. Kaspar. Now, where that's interesting is generally Frank Kaspar Chicago mouthpieces just say Frank Kaspar Chicago Co. Because there were two people that were working, both named Frank Kaspar, Frank L. Kaspar and Frank Kaspar. So this is a very, very early Chicago Kaspar, and this is before the nephew, Frank Kaspar of Cicero, came to work for the factory. Because that's so early, 1940s, you actually hear a lot in common with the 1920s or 30s Chedeville in terms of overtones. The tone is there's less core. So as a soloistic mouthpiece, I don't get quite as much dynamic contrast. I can't get quite as many personalities. It's a big, thick sound. Again, still a lot in common with the Chedeville. But let me contrast that with a Cicero mouthpiece. So this is by the other Kaspar. So what's interesting about this is Frank L. Kaspar, especially when he moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, he worked a lot with Anthony Gigliotti and the Philadelphia orchestra. So you think about how different that sound is from the younger Kaspar, this Kaspar that I'm about to play now, who worked with Robert Marcellus and Clark Brody and the Midwest clarinet sound. Now, this is going to sound very different. This is also a thinner reed. So this is kind of like a canon. And I mean that in the best way possible. If I'm trying to play solo rep on this, like you can listen to Marcellus playing Debussy, I don't like it as much as, say, Harold Wright playing Debussy. This is a principal clarinet mouthpiece. It's a big sound. It's kind of inflexible. It's colorful, but it doesn't have as much control. It's this big, massive sound. It's a truck heading down the highway, and it's great, but I don't like it as much for solo rep or also for doubling. I mean, if I'm playing saxophone and I want some flexibility, this really doesn't give me any flexibility. If I try to do, you know, it's really strict. Playing Rhapsody on Blue on this, not so much. The Chicago, sure. The Chedeville, absolutely. I'll just compare the Chedeville really quickly to that. Also, you notice that with the Chedeville I'm using a front-facing bonade. With the Kaspars I'm using reverse-facing. And that's just because both of those Kaspars I just played were about 1.14 millimeter, which is pretty typical. This Chedeville is a 1.0 millimeter. So you see the Chedeville, even though it gets this more beautiful highs in the sound, you know. It still can be very, very flexible. It can still be very aggressive. It's just not quite as masculine. And I hate to gender stereotype, but that's the thing, is that Cicero's is very, you know, very powerful. You know, you've got to do it. You've got to play the clarinet. Whereas the Chedeville is a more precise tool, I think. And the Chicago is somewhere in between. Chicago is really a pleasant mouthpiece to listen to, like in chamber music. One of my teachers has a chamber music festival down in Palm Beach, Florida, and he plays the Chicago, and it's just this really beautiful sound. It's kind of a jack of all trades, I think. All right, speaking of jack of all trades, here's a wonderful An Arbor by Frank Kaspar. And this is on a Babbitt blank, but tell me that this is not the most like the Chedeville of any of these Kaspars. So of the three Kaspars, I think I actually like the sound of this the best. This is definitely the best doubler piece of the three. But that big, hulking, principal clarinet, big sound of the Cicero, or even the Chedeville, is not totally here with this. And that's, again, East Coast versus Midwest. So I've tried at least 25, maybe 30 Kaspar mouthpieces. Everyone is different. And a later Chicago versus this early Frank L. low logo Chicago will be totally different. Later Cicero's on a Babbitt blank are way different. Early An Arbors on a Chedeville blank that have a bigger exit bore are completely different. I really like those. In terms of like practicality, if you're principal clarinet, a Cicero with a good facing probably needs to be refaced by somebody that knows the voicing of Kaspars. Is a great fire and forget weapon, but I like the more sweet nature of the Frank L's, and the early Chicagos, and of course of Chedevilles. And I think it's tough if you're playing your brass section is just really loud and you need a lot of sound. That Cicero can really get a big sound, and it never gets too bright. There's the genius of Marcellus right there. Is kind of had all this warm, thick sound. So it just, like anything, what's your job? What's the context? That will tell you which one of these Frank Kaspars is better for you.